Good afternoon and welcome to this Federal Bar Association hosted program. I am Magistrate Judge Teresa James from the District of Kansas, and I'm happy to have helping me host today Ethan Lange, who is our Vice President of the Kansas and Western District of Missouri FBA. So hello, Ethan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Judge James.
Good. And we are here today for an interview with our newest Western District of Missouri Magistrate Judge Brian Gaddy. And welcome, Judge Gaddy.
Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate being here on the interview, and it's good to see both of you.
Good to see you. And I'm going to forego any great formal introduction of you, Judge Gaddy, although I'd love to do that. But really, that's the purpose of this interview, for us to ask you questions and kind of let you introduce yourself to the lawyers and other judges and FBA members who are very interested, I'm sure, to get to know you better. So without further ado, I think we'll just start in with the interview, if that's okay with you, Judge Gaddy.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Well, first of all, a softball question for you, Judge Gaddy. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Lebanon, Missouri, which is a small town down by Springfield. I grew up on a small farm, and we really enjoyed it. It was a great place to grow up, and graduated high school there in 1986.
So after Lebanon, where did you go for your undergraduate degree, and what did you major in?
After high school, I went to the University of Missouri, Columbia. I started out thinking I was going to major in engineering. And after one semester of the math and science, I quickly figured out that engineering was not the right path for me. So I ended up in the business school. I ended up getting my degree in accounting. And I quickly determined that I didn't want to be an accountant. And I can make fun of accountants because my wife's a CPA, but I figured out that wasn't probably something I wanted to do. So that's how I kind of fell backwards really into going to law school. It wasn't necessarily something that I had a lifelong goal of doing, but I wanted to continue my education. And I thought that was the kind of the next logical step. So I applied to all the regional law schools and ended up going to UMKC. So I graduated undergrad in, I think, 1990, and went to UMKC Law School from 91 to 94.
Well, you kind of hit upon my next question, which is, well, why did you choose the law? So would you like to elaborate on that any more, Judge Gaddy?
No, I wanted to pursue my education further. And again, law school had always been in the back of my mind. I always laugh about the trajectory since I had the accounting background. I went to law school thinking I was going to practice primarily in corporate law and taxes and maybe estates and trust. And strange thing happened. I did very well in my criminal law class and enjoyed constitutional law, and then ended up getting a law clerk position with my old firm, Wersch, Hobbs, and Merakian, that practiced primarily federal court litigation and white-collar criminal matters. So the path changed for me as I got my experience. I ended up practicing for 26 years in criminal law and a lot of it in federal court and white collar criminal defense.
Well, we're going to throw in a few fun questions to get to know
Sure.
you. So what is your favorite lawyer movie?
That's a tough question to answer. I like a lot of legal thrillers. I like a lot of the lawyer movies, but I think one of the classics that I watched years ago that really kind of got my interest in litigation was 12 Angry Men, the original one. And I think nowadays that should be called 12 Angry People. It was titled in the Sign of the Times, I think 1950s is when that came out. But that always stands out at me as one of my favorite legal movies. But I do enjoy all legal movies, and I enjoy the books. I read Grisham books. They are, it's just something I've done my whole life. So I enjoy all of that. grew up in the 80s. I watched LA Law on TV back in the day, loved it as well. So I do enjoy a lot of the law TV shows and movies.
And you're too young, I guess, to remember Perry Mason. Is that right, Judge Gaddy?
You know, Perry Mason was on a little bit, but yes, I did not watch a lot of that. I think I read, though, recently there may be a remake or a new series coming out about Perry Mason. So that got my interest. I may watch it. I don't remember what, there's so many networks and subscriptions anymore. I can't remember where I read that, but I think there's a new Perry Mason series coming out.
Well, that would be good. Well, continuing on the fun question category, we'd like to know who or which is your favorite sports team that you like to follow.
Well, I'm a glutton for punishment because I do follow the Missouri Tigers, and I know that may not be popular with some folks on the conference here today. And maybe it's popular with others. I see. Going to MU, even though I attended law school at UMKC, I do bleed black and gold. But as you all know, it can be painful at times being a Missouri fan. But I grew up. My father went to MU, and my son is there now. So we have a real strong family tradition with that school. So I grew up going to the football games and the basketball games. But as we all know, it can be up and down. Also, I love the NFL, and I've been watching the Chiefs since I think I started watching the Chiefs when Marty Schottenheimer came. I believe I really started an interest with the Chiefs seems like in the early 90s. And we are avid Chiefs fans. I like baseball too. I've kind of grown up in Lebanon. We were kind of grew up Cardinal and Royals fans. I know that's strange because a lot of people are one or the other and not both, but I grew up following the Cardinals and the Royals, living in Lebanon, Missouri. But love the Kansas City Chiefs. Very disappointed with the game we had a few weeks ago.
Yes,
we all are.
I won't hold MU against you, Judge Gaddy. Rock chalk, though.
I knew that. I figured that would be coming at some point. I've got a lot of friends that are KU fans, so I get that a lot.
So, Judge Gaddy, you briefly touched on this earlier, but would you elaborate a little bit about your legal practice before going on the bench?
Yeah, so I was blessed. As I mentioned, I got a clerkship, and back then it was a different name. It's now Wersch, Hobbs, and Merakian, and I stayed there after law school, and I had the privilege of practicing with really, really outstanding trial lawyers. I'm going to leave some of them out, but the key mentors of mine were J.R. Hobbs and Jim Wersch, and for a short period of time, Charlie Atwell before he became a judge, and again, many others connected with that firm. I practiced there for, I think, 12 years from 94 to 06, and really got a wide exposure and broad experience in litigation. Again, the focus, if you had one, was white collar and investigations and complex criminal cases. But as I grew, the firm allowed me to get a lot of my own experience, and it's important to me to kind of give back to the community. I'm very proud of my service on the Criminal Justice Act panel. That's the federal panel of attorneys that take criminal appointments when the federal public defender is conflicted. And I think ironically, the judge and my dear friend that I replaced, John Moffmer, appointed me to my first CJA case in 1996. And that was a way not only to, I think, give back a little bit to the court and to the community, but it was also a great way to get experience. Judge James can tell you this, and Mr. Lange, I don't know if you're familiar with that process or not, but I got appointed on some really unique, interesting cases. And as my experience grew, I always kind of have a funny saying that I didn't go looking for the death penalty, but the death penalty found me. It's a long story, but I got appointed as co-counsel on a capital case in '06. Didn't have a lot of experience with federal capital trial work. I got it quickly, and ended up trying the case with another mentor, not in my firm, but another local mentor of mine, Jim Eisenbrand, who is also a longstanding white-collar defense lawyer in town. But we tried a federal capital murder case to verdict. At the guilt phase, the person was found guilty, but we won the penalty phase. And that was tried in front of Judge Fenner in the Western District of Missouri, who's a longtime judge that I appeared in front of and someone that I always enjoyed practicing in front of. And it was a wonderful experience. So then after that result, I kind of had I didn't feel like it, but I had the learned counsel designation. So I actually have been appointed on, I would say, 7 other federal capital murder cases that at least started out having a death penalty eligibility to them. In all those, after that first trial, I was able to, with the team, to convince Department of Justice not to seek the death penalty. So a few of those I kept for trial. I've tried several murder cases in federal court, and it's been a great experience. But I again, jokingly say I didn't really go looking for that. It found me based on my experience. But I do credit, and again, when I was with Wersch Hobbs and when I went out on my own, those cases provided invaluable experience. It gets you into court. It gets you to appear for a variety of hearings on motions, and not just the trials, but the preparation. And I learned a lot about mental health issues in some of the cases and other issues that we confront. So I value that experience as much as I do the billable hour and the white collar experience that I had. But I would say my criminal practice was 85% of my practice. I did do a little bit of civil work. I always say enough to be dangerous, but a lot of times it was parallel to a criminal case. Like if you had a healthcare provider, you might have the licensing action or a civil forfeiture case that came from a criminal allegation. But that's kind of my practice. I left Wersch Hobbs in 2012, and I've been in smaller firms kind of on my own until being appointed to the bench. The same type of practice, criminal defense, primarily in federal court. And I've had a lot of appellate court experience too.
It's interesting, Judge Gaddy, you and I talked a little bit about this in anticipation of this interview, but you and I have exact opposite practices before coming on the bench. Mine was almost exclusively civil, whereas yours was primarily criminal. So, which kind of weighs heavily, I think, in a magistrate judge's security or lack thereof when coming on the bench, which kind of leads to the next question we had, which is why did you want to become a magistrate judge?
That's a tough question as well. I'd always had it in the back of my mind, but as your career develops, you go through the various stages of learning. I always felt like, and there's no litmus test, there are a lot of great judges that are younger than me, but I always felt like me personally, I needed maturity and some experience that I was always searching for. Always wanted more trial experience. I think trials are hard to get in this day and age. We all know that. So I was always searching again for more experience. And then quite frankly, my family situation, my son, again, as I mentioned, was in college. So it seemed like the timing was right for me. I love the private practice. I was blessed with good work and good experiences, but it felt like the timing was right. But, my dad was a veteran, and I'd always thought about service of some kind. And time has a tendency to tick away with all of us. And I really wanted to do something more broadly. It appealed to me to, being an advocate's a wonderful thing, but you are advocating one side. And sometimes that advocacy may be consistent with justice and it may not be, honestly. So I felt like, maybe being in a more neutral role where I can truly seek the right answer, the right result, it would be appealing. I tell my staff and myself this all the time. My number one goal is to get the job done, to get the right result, and everything else will fall into place. And I think that's critically important. So, it was, again, ironic in Missouri, on the Western District of Missouri, we had the same three magistrate judges for years, Judges Larson, Hayes, and Moffmer. And they were, really, it's odd to say a judge is a mentor to a litigant, because there is always kind of that separation between the bench and the bar. But these magistrates that we appeared in front of were fantastic. They were mentors to me. I learned a lot practicing in front of them. I worked hand in glove with them over the years, especially on CJ matters and, budgeting for these capital cases. And they were truly an influence on my decision. We've got some newer magistrate judges that have become or have been longtime friends of mine. Judge Willie Epps in Jeff City was an influence on my decision. And I've gotten to know the other new judge that you interviewed a couple months ago, Jill Morris, who's quickly become a close friend. And I've known Lawana Counts for years and have gotten to know David Rush down in Springfield. And I just hold all the U.S. magistrate judges on the Missouri side in high regard. I don't want to leave out the Article III judges appearing in front of many of them during my career. They were an influence as well. I remember one of our district court judges, one time I invited him to speak at a class I taught, and I probably took more notes than the students, because I wanted to get to know all the judges. And he commented that he didn't know, there wasn't a day that went by where he dreaded going to the office. And even though I loved the private practice of law, I don't know that I could say that I loved every day that I went in, and that stood out at me. So I had a lot of good influences that were on the bench. Charlie Atwell's another example. He was a partner in our firm way back in the day, and I watched his career. He was a Jackson County Circuit judge, and just had a lot of good influences of folks that were on the bench. So it was kind of the right time, and something that I thought, if I don't do this now, I'm not going to do it. I would have been, the other thing I was going to mention is, being in federal court, it is a blessing. I would have probably felt out of place a little bit in state court. I didn't pursue any state judgeships because, again, most of my experience and skill set was in federal court. I've appeared quite a bit in Kansas, but the Western District of Missouri, the courthouse literally is like home to me. So it felt like a really good fit, and everything worked out very well.
What has surprised you the most about being a judge?
I hate to even speak about COVID, but I think that, that's been the biggest issue or surprise, if you will. I was sworn in on September 25th. I did have the honor of conducting some in-person hearings in October, and I can't remember when we closed again. It seems like it was in November at some point. But, the shift to Zoom, we're all here on Zoom today. It's something we all have to do. We've had to adapt. It's something I've embraced because, the hearings must take place, and we have to do the best we can do, but it's not ideal. And I think it's probably made my learning curve a little steeper. I am a people person. I liked going to court. I like seeing lawyers. I liked talking to the other side when I would, before the hearings. I always enjoyed going. So I think we're all missing that as part of our profession. I actually said the other day that I miss attending CLE. I didn't think those words would probably ever come out of my mouth. I've spoken at a lot of them, but I miss getting together with people and seeing people. I'm hoping we get back to some sense of normalcy soon, but that's probably been one of the biggest challenges I've faced. And I have the utmost respect for our leadership, including our Chief Judge, Beth Phillips. She's had to, really maneuver and plan and accommodate the whole situation. And they've done a great job in doing that. But it's been definitely a learning curve trying to just deal with Zoom conferences. For those of you that don't practice in criminal law, I mean, we Zoom into the jail facilities. And, you know, I'm sure Judge James can tell you about this, but, you know, they don't always run on time. Sometimes they're loud. Sometimes the computer doesn't work. You don't have IT folks on the other end. So it's been a challenge at times. We haven't had anyone appear yet as a cat on Zoom, like we saw go viral with the lawyer the other day. But we've had some funny incidents, and you have to learn a lot of patience when you're trying to Zoom with defendants that are in custody.
A couple of questions about to help lawyers who might appear in front of you once we get through COVID. Yeah. What advice do you have for lawyers appearing in front of you? And similarly, what do you like to hear from lawyers who are bringing, in civil cases, discovery disputes before you?
All right, on the first issue, I think that some advice that I would give is don't assume that we know everything, because we don't. And I've noticed maybe it's worse on the computer, but sometimes we'll have an oral argument or a presentation, and the pace can be fast. I'm a note taker. So I always would tell folks, if you're going through a legal argument or making a detailed presentation, slow down a little bit, because I am taking notes. I'm trying to pay attention to what the litigants are raising. Discovery disputes, Judge James, I mean, a lot of my practice so far as a judge has been on the criminal side. I think a lot of the civil cases have slowed up due to COVID. The criminal matters, as you know, continue. So I haven't really had to preside yet over a whole lot of discovery disputes. I would tell folks, you know, try to work it out. You know, the local rules require meet and confer, and certain things that have to happen before you come to a judge. But when I practice, I always believe that if you have respect for the other side, you can be zealous, you can be the advocate, but be civil, be professional, and you should be able to get most of that worked out before you get a court involved. And I just encourage folks, again, I think that's part of seeing each other. I always worried as my practice grew, a lot of times you would receive emails that might have a tone or might say things that the person wouldn't dare say to you in person. So I always really emphasize when I was practicing, be careful with the letters, be careful with the emails, try to, again, be cordial. You can be zealous, but you can also try to get along and try to come up with solutions, especially on discovery disputes.
So, but for COVID-19 restrictions, what types of hearings or matters would you typically want to handle in person versus, you know, say by telephone or video conference, which is probably here to stay?
This is going to maybe sound silly. I would want to have every hearing in person, even post-COVID. As I mentioned, I enjoyed coming to court. I always think if you can get folks together and they can discuss things, there's good that can come from that. I also believe, again, on the criminal side, I mean, you have constitutional protections, including confrontation, and there is a face-to-face component to that. I believe that we should have, as much as we can, when it is safe, in-person hearings, especially, I'm not telling you I'm not nimble, I'll adapt to anything, but especially evidentiary hearings. I think you lose something in judging a witness's credibility and judging even certain exhibits. If you're looking at a screen, it almost becomes like watching a TV show or a movie. I think a courtroom is a magical place, and I think that everyone ought to be able to appear in the courtroom and experience it. And again, I would prefer to have most everything in person when it's safe.
Well, Judge Gaddy, I think our time is about up, but to wrap things up, what have we overlooked? What else would you like FBA folks to know about you? Anything you'd like to add?
You know, probably not. I mean, me and my staff are very approachable. Again, if there are problems in cases, we want to try to solve them. Sometimes I've had other judges tell me this will, sometimes they're the last to know if there's discovery problems or other problems with the case. Bring it to our attention. We'll try to be a solution. I am an open book on things like that. And I want folks to know that we're approachable, and we're here to serve the public, including all the litigants and all of their counsel. And we take that very seriously. I don't know if there's any other tips or not. I again, enjoy seeing lawyers and enjoy having the hearings. And if anyone needs anything from us, that's why we're there, and we're willing to help and do what we can to make sure that justice is served on the citizens of the Western District of Missouri.
All right, Ethan, anything else that you'd like to ask?
Nothing further from me. Judge, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you both. I wish we could have done this in person. I've enjoyed speaking with both of you. Mr. Lange, I'm hoping maybe I'll see you soon in the court in the Western District of Missouri. And Judge James, I think I mentioned to you offline, I've appeared in front of you once or twice when I went over to the District of Kansas, but it certainly has been a pleasure to reconnect with you and get to chat with you a little bit about my new job, and yours maybe isn't quite as new. Did you say you're up for reappointment soon? Is that my memory correct on that?
I've been here over 7 years now, so
I would have lost a bet on that. Time kind of ticks away, right? I still considered you new.
It has flown by, but it has been a pleasure getting to meet you, Judge Gaddy, and I look forward to, I'm sure our paths will be crossing, and I look forward to that. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you all who are tuning in to watch this interview. Take care.
Thank you.